So I did have a question that maybe just you can give me your opinion on what you thought of the confirmation of Kavanaugh into the Supreme Court, like just what you read about him specifically, and then obviously you could talk about the process of getting him there. But
Well, I think that that whole situation is just another basically a commentary on what's going on in our culture. It's just getting more and more coarsened as time goes on. And you know what? I'm going to be looked on as partisan in saying this stuff. But I've been watching politics for a long time. I first started getting involved in interested in politics in the early '80s, before you were born. In the early '80s,
good old days.
yeah, in the good old days. And what I have seen is one party, specifically the Democrat Party, constantly goes after these kinds of means to get what they want. And so they'll come up with these surprises, and they'll come up with allegations, and they'll come up and basically they're just designed to make somebody back off. So you have a guy who's absolutely qualified from everything that I read about. The guy's absolutely qualified to be on the Supreme Court, and these guys come up with a sexual allegation against him that has literally no witnesses to it, and they hold on to that stuff until the week that he's supposed to be confirmed, and then they blast this stuff out there. And I don't know if the lady that's involved was involved in that whole thing. I don't know one way or another, because what I've seen over the years is politicians that come along and just do these kinds of things, and it's literally orchestrated. And I was appalled by it. I was angry. And obviously, when I was watching the hearings, I was waiting to see if there was any kind of truth to it, any kind of corroboration to it, because it could be absolutely true.
Yeah,
could have been
is,
absolutely true. Yeah, but the way that it was presented was absolutely ridiculous. That is not the way that's done. That's not there are rules in the Senate, and the Democrats obviously violated any kind of reasonable behavior in the way that they did that whole thing. And they've literally trashed the man's name for a good portion of his life. They did this in the '80s with a judge named Robert Bork, and I watched that whole thing. They did it with Clarence Thomas, and I watched that whole thing. And this is getting worse and worse. And what's going to, it's just not a good thing. Up until this point, what I've seen, and one of the major problems that I've had with the other party, is that they allow this kind of nonsense, and there's no repercussions that come down on the people who are perpetrating these things. And so it has to do with basically the way that American politics have gone in the Senate, and there are basically rules of decorum that have been used ever since the 1800s, and you have for the most part, some of the Republicans who are trying to stick to the rules of decorum when they have people on the other side who could give a rip about those things.
And that means what you're wearing, right? Decorum?
No, decorum is the way that you present yourself, the way that you speak about others. There's rules about what you can and cannot say about others in the Senate, and that kind of thing. And you have people on the other side in the Senate who could give a rip about that. And so again, that's what I'm talking about with the coarsening of the political system in the Senate specifically. The House of Representatives has always been a free-for-all.
Yeah.
And but it hasn't been like that in the Senate. And so I think that what happened to Judge Kavanaugh was ridiculous. I think that the way that the Democrats did it was evil. I think it was a wicked thing to do. And even if the allegations had turned out to have some kind of foundation in fact, which they did not, even if they had had some kind of foundation in fact, the way that was presented was completely ridiculous. It would be embarrassing. You know, I have family members that were sexually abused, and I would never want one of my family members that went through that to have to stand up in front of the whole United States and give testimony in that way. And so even if it had been absolutely true, the way that these people did it was absolutely out of line. Just makes me mad. And so we have that going on. I do a prophecy update every year. And one of the things that I'm going to be looking at this year is the possibility of a civil war. You know, there's got to be something that gets the United States out of the picture prophetically, because we are not in the Bible. There may be hints of the United States being in the Bible, but as far as a major player, we're not in the Bible. And so, my options for that down through the years have been, maybe we're taken out by outside forces. Maybe there's a nuclear war, and we're not on the scene anymore. Maybe we become isolationists and we don't care anymore. Maybe the rapture, or maybe there's a revival, and most of the people in the country get saved, and then the rapture just takes us out, and there's hardly anybody left. That's almost my greatest, my favorite option. How about this? Maybe there's a civil war, and we just take ourselves out. How about that? And that's what it's looking like more and more. Before the first Civil War, there was one party that caused that, and you have the same situation that's going on now, and it's a pretty scary thing. And so when you have a group of people who are willing to give up the whole idea, I wouldn't say they're willing to give up. They're willing to take away innocent until proven guilty from certain classes of people. That's over the top. And again, these people are wicked. This is stuff that has been the foundation, one of the foundations of justice in Western civilization for about 1,000 years, innocent until proven guilty. And you have people who are openly touting this stuff and saying that it shouldn't be the case. That should be the case in every type of situation that we have, with every interaction that we have with people. It's not just something that's in a court of law. And the whole idea that what was happening was there was a job interview, that's nothing but a stinking excuse, and it's nonsense. That is not the way that you treat people. It's wrong. And we've talked about this a couple of different times. Deuteronomy chapter 19, end of the chapter, makes it really clear that you don't believe allegations that are brought up against people unless they're brought up by 2 or 3 witnesses, and the witnesses have to be people who have proof. They can't be people who are shown to be lying. It can't be that kind of situation. And so proof means proof. That means there needs to be real credible, and when I say credible, not believable. When I go and watch a movie and I see a good actor, they're credible.
Yeah.
But it's nothing but fantasy. And so it has to be something that's seated in logic and in absolute truth and that kind of thing. And none of that took place with this whole thing. So Kavanaugh and his family got trashed, and they got trashed by the Democrats. It was on purpose, and it was wicked. And so that's what I think.
Yeah. And you just mentioned something I thought of when you were talking about corroboration between 2 or 3 witnesses. It's not a perfect system of justice, because there are circumstances where there are no witnesses and something happens to someone, which is why the Bible speaks of the fact that God is the ultimate judge.
Right, absolutely. And in our system of justice, the witnesses aren't just it's not just eyewitness testimony that's used. And so in our system of justice, DNA is a witness. Circumstantial evidence in the sense of, you got their blood all over you, is a witness to the fact that something's taken place. And so It's not just in our system of justice. It's not just two people being there with exactly the same testimony, and that's the reason that in these things, in these situations, that what needs to happen is it needs to be reported quickly. It needs to be reported quickly, and if this is something that I've told to my kids. Anything like that happens, I want to know about it. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care about what anybody tells you that they're going to do to me. You make sure that you tell me, and the reason for that is because I want to get the bad guy.
Yeah,
and the bad guy should be got. So, anyway,
I did think of a third alternative to why the United States isn't on the landscape in the end times. Is all the believers who own the guns are raptured, and everyone who's left has nothing to fight with. So there's just not part of.
We take our guns with us. Our guns are raptured.
Our guns are in the safes with the condoms, and they don't know how to use them. So